A report was recently released by a company called AdLarge, who bills themselves as the leading independent ad sales and content company. That's at least according to their Twitter bio and their website. I'd never heard of this company before now, but apparently this report has been going out for the last 5 years. It's the 5th annual report. It's called the Podcast Buyer's Guide, or Podcast Buying Guide, rather. And it's not a report that's targeted directly to podcasters themselves, but rather to advertisers or those interested in purchasing podcast advertising inventory. But I saw this report come up in my feed, and I decided to take a look at it. If you want to take a look at it, by the way, there is a link in the description below. It is a free report. It's very informative. If you want to download it, you just have to give up your email address. But if you are a podcaster who is looking to monetize your podcast, or you just kind of want to get a better understanding of how that world works, I think this report is going to be very interesting and will have a lot of valuable information for you. So go check it out. But I'm not here to go through all the different key takeaways from the report. If that's something that interests you, I think you should go check it out. But what I did want to do is talk about some of the interesting statistics that I found within this report that I thought were quite interesting, kind of related to podcasting as a whole, and like the people who listen to podcasts, those types of things. So for starters, and by the way, these stats that I'm going to tell you, they're all US only. These stats are just for the United States. They're not global, which makes them that much more impressive in my opinion. But for starters, in 2021, the US podcasting advertising revenues not only exceeded $1 billion for the first time ever, but they actually exceeded it by $400 million, reaching $1.4 billion. So in 2021 alone, $1.4 billion was spent on podcast advertising. So that tells you right there that people are kind of growing wise to the value of advertising within podcasts. And it's growing fast, growing rapidly. So there seems to be a lot of opportunity there. Some other statistics in this report in relation to like demographics and podcast listener ages. For example, 58% of 18 to 44-year-olds in the United States listen to a podcast in the past week. And also 41% of listeners are non-white, kind of indicating that there's a lot of diversity in the podcast audience. When you compare, the population, the white population of the United States is 76%, and 41% of listeners are non-white. That shows you that a very broad, diverse group of people are listening to all types of podcasts. So what that says to me is there's an opportunity to reach a plethora, as you might say, of people, a very diverse group of people with very diverse group of interests. So just something interesting from that. And then also 177 million, again, this is just US alone, 177 million people say that they have listened to a podcast. 109 million say that they listen monthly, and 74 million say they listen weekly. That's a lot of people listening to podcasts. Now, I mean, we all know that there's a lot of podcasts out there. I saw a stat. What was it? I forget what it was, but it was, there are globally, I think it was a global stat. It was something like the number of podcasts in the world equals that of like the 2 most populated U.S. states. It was something along those lines. I'm butchering it. I'm just not even going to go any further because I'm sure the stat is wrong. But all that to say, there are a lot of podcasts in the world, but there are also a lot of people listening to podcasts. So a lot more competition than there was, say, 9 or 10 years ago in the podcasting space, but still a lot of opportunity there. 71% of podcast listeners trust podcast ads more than other ads. I think a lot of that comes from, when you have the hosts actually doing live ad reads, to hear hosts talking about the things that they're advertising and talking about them positively, especially if it comes off in a trusting way, leads more people to trust in those ads versus, ads from other sources. Also, 54% of marketers plan to increase their podcast investments this year, 2022. So again, a lot of money being poured into the podcast space. Not saying all this to say that you should jump into podcasting for the sake of, earning advertising revenue. It takes time to be able to do that, obviously. But just to let you know that the opportunity is there, the space is growing, and people are willing to invest more into the podcasting space, assuming that you can kind of position yourself to be able to advertise in podcasting.